Have you ever dreamed of your English flowing like a river, confident as a professional speaker? Welcome to Onyx Shadowing English, where we don't just learn English, we live it. I'll take you on an enchanting language adventure where stories become golden keys. Shadowing techniques transform you into a perfect echo of native speakers, and practical tips help you conquer English in every moment of your daily life. Let's explore and break through boundaries together. My name is Clara, and I am a student of English. I want to share my story with you, a story about my life in London, about my experiences, and especially about my remarkable teacher. As you read my story, I hope you will learn alongside me, improving your English step by step. It was a bright and sunny summer day when I first arrived in London. I was traveling by train, filled with excitement and anticipation. Two women were sitting across from me, chatting away in English. As they spoke, I could catch a few words here and there, but most of it was still beyond my understanding. Although I had studied English for a while, I was still very much a beginner. I only knew a few words and phrases, but I felt determined to try. With some effort, I managed to speak to the women using the basic English I knew. To my surprise, they understood me. I was thrilled. We talked for about 10 minutes, and during our conversation, I mentioned that I wanted to improve my English. They kindly told me they were from England, returning home after a conference. Before I knew it, the train reached my stop. I said my goodbyes, but before parting, the women gave me their contact details and invited me to visit them in England. It was such a kind gesture, and I was grateful. From that moment on, I became even more determined to work on my English. I practiced every day, translating texts and watching English language movies. 6 months later, my English had improved significantly. I was still eager to learn more, and that's when I decided to take the next step. I went to London to study English. When I arrived in London, I enrolled in a language school. My first lesson was on a Monday, and I was both nervous and excited. In class, I met my teacher, a young woman with a warm smile. We introduced ourselves, sharing where we were from, and then the lesson began. Our teacher was a strong believer in a different approach to learning. She asked us how we usually study English, and I shared my experience. She then explained her method, which was quite different from what I had expected. She said that we didn't need to study in the traditional sense, and we didn't have to rely on textbooks. The key to learning English, according to her, was using the language as much as possible. This made me feel so much better because I wasn't fond of studying from books and memorizing rules. Our teacher told us that language is all about communication. It's about sharing ideas and understanding others. That's why, in her course, we would focus on speaking and using English to connect with others. She emphasized that many students try to memorize new words and study grammar rules, but they often forget to actually speak the language. While vocabulary and grammar are important, she explained, it's crucial to use them in real conversations. I really liked what our teacher had to say. I was excited to learn this new method, one that didn't require endless memorization. Throughout the lesson, we spoke about our hobbies and how we spent our free time. We practiced speaking in pairs and with the teacher, never stopping to look at a textbook or grammar chart. We just spoke, and it was wonderful. For the first time, I felt like I was truly learning English, not just studying it, but using it in real, meaningful ways. The lesson was so enjoyable that I didn't want it to end. I could already see the benefits of this new approach. As I walked out of the class, I felt a sense of accomplishment and excitement. I knew that with this method, I would continue to improve my English and be able to communicate more confidently. The lesson was clear. When you want to learn English, don't just study the language, use it to communicate. It was Tuesday again, and I was back at school for my second lesson. As the class began, one of the students asked an interesting question. What is the best method to learn new words? Our teacher smiled and answered with a wealth of knowledge. She explained that there are many ways to learn new words, but in her opinion, reading was the most effective method. Reading helps you learn faster than people who don't read, she said. If you dedicate just 30 minutes a day to reading, you'll notice a significant improvement. This was something I hadn't considered before, so I listened closely as she continued. Our teacher emphasized that to get the most out of reading, the text must be something that interests you. Choose a book with a captivating story or an article related to your job or hobby, she advised. If the text is boring, it won't help you, but if you enjoy it, you'll want to keep going. She also told us that it was important to read texts with words we already knew. Of course, there would be times when we came across unfamiliar words. When this happened, she suggested we simply look up the word in a dictionary and keep reading. Don't stop to write the word down or try to memorize it right away. Just understand the meaning and move on, she explained. The key, according to our teacher, was to focus entirely on understanding the text, not just on memorizing individual words. When you come across another new word, repeat the process, look it up, and continue reading, she said. This simple method will help you build your vocabulary quickly. She also mentioned that reading helps us see how words are connected in sentences. By reading regularly, we naturally learn how words fit together correctly in context. I found this method very practical, and I could already see how it would help me improve my vocabulary. The lesson moved on, and we started discussing life in England. We also talked about the best jobs for students, which caught my attention. I was eager to find a job while I was studying, so I asked my classmates if they knew where I could look for one. They recommended going to a job center, where there were plenty of opportunities for students. Feeling encouraged, I visited the job center after school. I wasn't sure what kind of job I could do, so I asked the lady at the counter for advice. She explained that there were several options for students, including positions as a cleaner or a waiter at a cafe. I hesitated at first, mentioning that I had no experience with either of these roles. To my relief, the lady reassured me. "Your English is good enough for a job in a cafe," she said. "The training is simple, and you'll get to practice your English while speaking with customers." She even told me that I could start as early as Thursday. I was thrilled. Not only would I have a job, but I would also get to use my English in a real-world setting. That evening, I reflected on the advice our teacher had given. I realized how important it was to immerse myself in English, whether by reading, speaking, or even working. I had already learned so much, and now I had the opportunity to apply my skills in a practical way. The teacher's message was clear. If you want to learn new words effectively, make reading a daily habit. Just 30 minutes each day can make a huge difference. It was Wednesday, and I was back at school for another lesson. As usual, everyone was engaged, but there was one student who remained quieter than the rest. She was from South Korea, and although she didn't speak much, her presence was noticeable. When the teacher asked if anyone had questions, the girl hesitated but finally spoke up. She shared that she had a significant issue with pronunciation. Although she could understand English very well through reading and watching films, her speaking was not as strong. She confessed that she didn't like speaking much because she was self-conscious about her accent. She wanted to improve but didn't know where to start. Our teacher listened attentively before offering a solution. "I can help you with that," she said. "Let me explain why many students struggle with pronunciation and how you can improve it." The teacher explained that when we speak, we need to move the muscles in our mouth. The problem arises when students use the same muscle movements as they do in their native language. This causes their pronunciation to sound more like their first language than English. She reassured the class that it was perfectly normal for students to have different pronunciations compared to native speakers. "It's not a big issue," she said, "because people will still understand you. But if you want to improve, there are techniques you can use." One technique in particular stood out to me: shadowing. "Shadowing is simple," she explained. "It's about copying the sounds you hear." She likened it to how children learn their first language. When children speak their first words, they repeat what they hear from their parents. Over time, their pronunciation becomes more natural. You can use this same method to improve your English pronunciation. The teacher then introduced us to a video on YouTube where the shadowing technique was demonstrated. We watched the video, and then she encouraged us to practice shadowing ourselves. We spent the next few minutes listening and copying the sounds exactly as we heard them. I found it surprisingly effective. The more I mimicked the sounds, the clearer my pronunciation became. The teacher also explained how shadowing could be useful in more practical situations. "If you're preparing for a presentation," she said, "you can do shadowing to improve your pronunciation before speaking in front of others. It's a great way to sound more confident and natural." I was eager to try this technique outside of class, knowing it could help me in my own speaking practice. When the lesson was over, I decided to stop by the school's reception to ask about sports activities. I wanted to stay active during my time in England. The lady at the desk informed me that there was a table tennis team and a football team. She told me that the football team had practice that evening at 5, which excited me. I've always been passionate about sports, and football was something I enjoyed playing. That evening, I headed to the football training session. I met players from all over the world: Brazil, Japan, Russia, Spain, Argentina, and Italy. It was incredible to connect with so many people from different cultures, all while playing a sport I loved. I couldn't have asked for a better start to my time in England. As I left the field, I thought about everything I had learned that day. I had a fantastic teacher who shared valuable tips on improving pronunciation, and I had also made new friends on the football team. Plus, tomorrow, I would start my new job. Things were falling into place, and I was excited about what the next days would bring. From now on, whenever I wanted to improve my pronunciation, I would remember the teacher's advice: repeat after native speakers. It seemed like a simple method, but I knew it would make a big difference. It was Thursday, and I was eager for another day at school. Today, there was a new student in our class. Her name was Monica, and she was from Italy. Our teacher welcomed her warmly and started the lesson by asking Monica a few questions. She explained that she already knew Monica because she had visited her class 1 year ago. At that time, Monica had been a beginner, attending a 2-week summer class. When Monica began speaking, I was amazed. Her English was beautiful, her pronunciation was perfect, and she spoke with such fluency. Our teacher smiled and complimented her, saying, "Your school in Italy must be excellent." Monica laughed softly and replied, "I don't go to any school. I learn English at home. I use the techniques you taught me. I read a lot, practice shadowing, and think aloud. I try to think more in English than in Italian. That's how I work on my English." Monica explained that the 2 weeks she had spent in our class last summer had been incredibly helpful. "You showed me the way," she said. "Back then, I was a beginner, but now I can speak English. I wanted to come back to learn from you again." Our teacher was visibly pleased, thanking Monica for her hard work. Listening to Monica was very inspiring for me. I had already learned about reading and shadowing, but the thinking aloud technique Monica mentioned was new to me. I was curious, so I raised my hand and asked, "What is thinking aloud?" Our teacher smiled and said, "It's a very effective technique, but it requires strong motivation. Some people might think it's a bit crazy, but once you start thinking aloud, you can improve your English quickly." I felt motivated and said, "I have strong motivation. I don't mind if it's crazy. If it works, I want to learn it. Can you teach us?" "Of course," our teacher replied. "It's simple. We all think in our native language all day, every day. The goal is to start thinking in English instead. And when you begin thinking in English, you can start speaking those thoughts aloud. That's all there is to it." I nodded. "It's simple, but why is it so effective?" "Well," the teacher said, "maybe Monica can explain better. She's used this technique herself. Would you mind sharing your experience, Monica?" Monica agreed, and she began to share her journey. When I started thinking aloud, it wasn't easy. I began with very simple sentences like, "I can speak English. It's good that I can speak English. I want to get better. I need to practice every day." At first, the sentences were very simple, but I had a problem. My thoughts in Italian were much longer and more complicated. I couldn't say exactly what I was thinking in English. I had to simplify my thoughts to fit English. She paused for a moment before continuing. Thinking in simple English was the hardest part, but over time, it became more natural. Then something interesting happened. I met a man from Australia who was visiting Italy. Even though I was still a beginner, we started talking in English. I could see that I was able to speak with him without major issues. My sentences were simple and short, but I could express myself. I wasn't translating from Italian to English anymore. Monica smiled, reflecting on her progress. After meeting the man from Australia, I used thinking aloud more often. It helped me a lot with speaking. I still use it every day. Our teacher thanked Monica for sharing her experience, and I felt inspired. I was determined to try this technique to improve my speaking as well. I want to use thinking aloud too, I thought. I want to be better at speaking, just like Monica. When you want to speak English fluently, remember the key. Think aloud. It was my second day of work at the cafe, and I was feeling a bit more confident. The cafe, which served coffee, tea, sandwiches, and delicious chocolate cakes, was modern and cozy. My boss, at just 25 years old, was incredibly experienced. She had started working there over 2 years ago and knew everything about the cafe. She patiently showed me how to make coffee, wash dishes, and handle customers. It was all new to me, but I quickly realized that I would learn fast. Although I could only remember about 20% of what she taught me on the first day, she gave me the chance to try the tasks, correcting me when I made mistakes. By the end of the day, I was exhausted, but I was excited to have a job. The next day, back at school, one of my classmates asked a question that many of us think about when learning English. Sometimes, when I speak, I'm not sure if I'm using correct grammar. What should I do if I want to improve my grammar? Our teacher smiled and thanked the student for the great question. There are two main reasons people study English. Some want to speak the language fluently, while others study English to pass exams. Each situation is a little different. Let's talk about those who need English for speaking first. If that's you, don't worry too much about grammar. When you learned your first language, you didn't study grammar rules. You learned it naturally. The same can happen with English. The best way to learn grammar naturally is by reading. Books are written using correct grammar, so when you read, you're learning grammar without even trying. You also learn grammar by practicing shadowing, where you repeat what you hear. This helps you practice speaking with correct grammar naturally, without needing to memorize rules. Our teacher continued, if you're learning English for speaking, but also want to focus on grammar, you can visit a website called grammarinlevels.com. It's a great resource that shows grammar rules tailored to different levels of English. You can see which grammar rules are important for speaking at each level. Then the teacher spoke to those studying for exams. If you're learning English to pass an exam, I recommend focusing on exam-specific study materials. You can find past exam versions online to practice with. While your exam may differ slightly, the structure is usually quite similar. Practice with these materials until you're consistently getting the right results. Only take the exam when you feel confident that you can pass. The student who had asked the question replied, "Thank you. That's helpful." I felt relieved. I had no interest in taking exams. I just wanted to speak English confidently. I was glad to hear that I didn't have to focus too much on grammar rules. I loved reading, and now I realized I could improve my grammar by reading books. After class, I went to grammarinlevels.com. It was a fantastic website with grammar rules and examples for each level. They divided everything into 3 levels based on vocabulary size: 1,000, 2,000, and 3,000 words. I found it useful for improving my grammar in a simple way. In the afternoon, I returned to work. It was my second day, and I could already handle many tasks by myself. My boss was still there to help when needed, but I was starting to feel like I was getting the hang of things. The work wasn't too difficult, and it was great that I could also practice my English while talking to customers. I realized that when you want to improve your grammar, the best thing you can do is read a lot. It was Monday again, and I headed to school. Our teacher began by asking what we had done over the weekend. I shared that I had worked on Saturday and that I was already getting comfortable with my tasks. I told them I felt happy when I could speak with customers. As I spoke, one of the girls in the class asked, "What happened to your voice? You sound different compared to last week. Your pronunciation is much better." I smiled and replied, "Thank you." I practiced shadowing on Saturday evening after work and the entire Sunday. I tried to speak like a native speaker. It's not perfect, but I can already hear a big improvement in my pronunciation. Our teacher then asked if anyone else had tried shadowing. 3 students raised their hands, including a student from South Korea who also enjoyed the technique. One student shared that she had tried it, but her mouth hurt after just 5 minutes, so she stopped. She also mentioned that the recordings were too fast for her to repeat everything. Our teacher thanked everyone for trying the technique and explained, if it's your first time doing shadowing and your mouth hurts after 5 minutes, that's actually a good sign. It's like starting at the gym. Your muscles might hurt because they aren't used to the new activity. If your mouth hurts, take a short break and then continue. With each practice session, your pronunciation will improve. Our teacher continued, shadowing also helps you work on things like intonation, rhythm, and connecting words into full sentences. I know the recordings can feel fast at first, but if you can't repeat everything, try repeating just the first or last word of the sentence. As you keep practicing, you'll be able to repeat more and more. I agreed with the teacher, adding, on Saturday it was hard for me, but by Sunday evening, I found it much easier to repeat what I heard. Then I had a question for our teacher. I checked out grammarinlevels.com, and it's interesting, but I don't know which level I should be at because I don't know how many words I know in English. Our teacher looked around and asked the class if anyone knew how many words they knew. It was funny because none of us knew the exact number. We all knew we were intermediate students, but we had no clue about the specifics. Our teacher smiled and said, there's a website that can help you with this. It's called testlanguages.com. You can take a simple test to find out how many words you know. It's quick, with only 2 steps, and you can take the test every month to see your progress. I was really curious, so I immediately went to the website and took the test. It told me that I knew 2,100 words in English. Most of the class knew between 2,000 and 2,200 words, but Monica and the student from South Korea had the highest scores, knowing about 2,500 words. Our teacher explained, so when you visit grammarinlevels.com, you should already know grammar from level 2. Since most of you know between 2,000 and 3,000 words, you should start looking at grammar from level 3, which is designed for students with that vocabulary range. Remember to check your progress every month. It was Tuesday again, and I went to school. One of the students asked our teacher an interesting question. I want to practice speaking with people around me, but I'm afraid of making mistakes. I don't want to look stupid. Can you help me? Our teacher smiled and said, making mistakes is a very interesting topic, and there are many opinions on it. I want to share what I believe is the best approach. I have a lot of experience with this because I also learn new languages. For example, right now, I'm learning Spanish. When I speak Spanish, I don't worry about making mistakes. The reason I don't care about mistakes is simple. When I was learning my native language, I didn't worry about mistakes either. Mistakes weren't important to me. My main goal was to express my ideas. That's it. She continued, I know that when I read a lot, speak, and practice shadowing, my Spanish will improve over time. It may seem simple, but that's what I've learned after many years of teaching and learning languages. It works very well for me and for many of my students. When I speak, I focus on speaking. Right now, I know about 1,500 words in Spanish, which is the level of a 2-year-old child. 2-year-olds make a lot of mistakes when they speak, but they don't care. They keep speaking, and by the time they're 3, they make fewer mistakes. By the time they're 4, they speak quite well. She smiled and added, you can do the same. Most of you already know around 2,000 words, so it's absolutely fine to make mistakes from time to time. As you keep using English, your mistakes will gradually decrease. You can't reach a higher level if you're afraid to make mistakes. It's okay to not be perfect when you practice English. Perfection comes with practice. She explained, everyone who learned English started at the beginning, from level 0. Learning a language is like learning to play a musical instrument. It requires training. When you first start, it's not perfect and mistakes are part of the process. It's normal. If you avoid making mistakes, you won't be able to reach higher levels. As you continue to use English, the mistakes will gradually fade. Our teacher offered more advice. If you want to make fewer mistakes, read a lot and practice shadowing. When you read, read aloud. This will help you make fewer mistakes in real conversations. The most important thing is to focus on exchanging ideas. Don't worry about making mistakes. When you speak, you're practicing how to express your ideas in words. You don't learn grammar or vocabulary during speaking. You have other ways to practice that. She smiled and concluded, don't worry. Everyone who learns a foreign language makes mistakes sometimes. Even famous people, CEOs, and politicians make mistakes. When you listen to them on TV, you'll see they don't worry about making mistakes. They care about what's important, expressing their ideas. You can do the same. Does that make sense? The girl nodded and said, yes, thank you. If I don't want to make mistakes, I'll read more and practice shadowing. It was Wednesday, and I went to school again. At the beginning of the lesson, one student raised a question. I've started reading more, and I feel that it's really helping me. I can see that my grammar is improving, but I have a problem. When I come across a word I don't know, I look it up in the dictionary and keep reading. Sometimes when I see the word again just 10 minutes later, I can't remember it and I have to look it up again. Can you help me remember the words better? Our teacher thought for a moment and replied, that's an interesting question, and I can explain why this happens. It's completely normal not to remember a new word right away. Generally, you'll need to look at a word 5 times before you start remembering it. There are also some words, especially verbs, that you'll need to see 10 or 15 times before you fully remember them. She continued, when we learn a new word, it goes through different phases. Only when you pass through the last phase do you truly remember the word. There are 5 phases, and we can look at them now. The first phase, she said, is when you see the word for the first time and you don't know it. You look it up in the dictionary. The second phase is when you see the word a second time. You recognize that you've seen it before, but you still don't remember what it means, so you look it up again. The third phase is when you see the word again and you have an idea of what it might mean. For example, you know it's a thing, an animal, or a verb, but you're not sure exactly. In the fourth phase, you know what the word means when you see it, but you can't recall it when you try to say it. At this point, the word is in your passive vocabulary. The fifth phase is when you can use the word naturally in speaking. Our teacher smiled and said, so now you can see there are 5 phases in total. Does this help you understand why it's not possible to remember a word the first time you see it? It's usually not possible to skip all the phases with just one meeting. You need to see or hear a word multiple times and let it go through all the phases. She encouraged us. You can be proud not just when you perfectly learn a new word, but also when you move from one phase to the next. Every time you move forward, you get closer to the final goal, being able to use the word fluently in daily communication. The student smiled and said, I didn't know about these phases, but it makes sense now. I often forget a new word right after I look it up, and I feel frustrated. Now I understand that it's okay to forget a word when I first encounter it. I need to see it more times before I can really use it. After school, I went to my football training. Our coach announced that there would be a match on Saturday. The school team would play against another school team from Cambridge. Our coach asked me to come and play for the school team, and I was so happy. I was really looking forward to the match on Saturday. Our teacher finished by saying, when you want to remember a new word, try to see or hear it about 10 times. That's how you can move through the phases and remember it for good. The next day, I went to school again. One of the students asked an important question. He wanted to know how to improve his listening skills and what the best method was. Our teacher smiled and said, thank you for your question. Good listening skills are essential for communication. If you can't understand what people are saying, it will be difficult for you to have a conversation with them. She continued, there are many materials on the internet that can help you practice listening to English. Some students have trouble choosing the right materials for themselves. Let me tell you about the types of materials you can use. There are two main types of materials for listening practice: audio and films. These are different, but both can help you improve. When you listen to audio, it's best to know 95% or more of the words. If the audio has too many new words, try reading the text first and look up all the new words in the dictionary. The main goal when practicing listening is to understand spoken language, not to learn new words. Of course, sometimes you'll learn new words, but the focus should be on getting the information from what's being said. It's important to choose materials that match your level of English. For example, you can use simplified books that come with audio recordings. These are great because you can choose books that match your level. When you have such a book, read it first and then listen to the recording either at home or while traveling. I highly recommend checking out books at websites like RobinsonCrusoeInLevels.com or theprisonerofzenda.com. You can also visit newsinlevels.com if you like listening to news. All these resources offer materials at 3 different levels of English. She added, the second type of material for listening practice is films and videos on youtube.com. These are very helpful too. Once you know at least 2,000 words in English, you can start using them. Here's what you should do. Watch a film for the first time with subtitles so you can understand the story. Then, watch the film again without subtitles. If you really like the film, you can watch it more than once. The more times you watch a film, the more you'll understand with each viewing. Our teacher continued, it's also good to watch videos on topics that interest you. For example, if you like nature, you can watch documentaries about nature. Reality shows are another good option because their structure is usually predictable and easier to understand than films or documentaries. One important tip, she said, is that you need to listen for at least 30 minutes every day. The key is consistency. When you listen to English materials, always focus on what you already understand. Even if it's only 10% at first, that's still better than nothing. Keep listening, and soon that understanding will grow to 20 or 30%. Celebrate every new sentence you can understand. The student nodded, clearly satisfied, and said, yes, thank you. This information is very helpful. Now I know exactly what I need to do to improve my listening skills. Our teacher concluded, remember, to get good at listening, aim to listen for 30 minutes every day. Practice consistently, and you'll get better and better. On Friday, we had an interesting conversation in class. Our teacher asked a question. Do you remember your first impulse to learn English? Can you recall the moment when you decided to start learning it? I replied, yes, I remember the moment I started to be interested in English. Our teacher encouraged me to share my story. I said, well, first, I have to admit that English wasn't always my favorite subject. I began learning English in high school, and at the start, it was really difficult for me. I didn't understand the structure of the language. It felt illogical. I tried to memorize words and learn grammar, but it was very hard. By the time I finished high school, I was still a beginner. I couldn't speak English, and I believed that I wasn't capable of learning it. I thought English just wasn't for me. Then something happened, I continued. I've always liked music, and when I was 20, I started listening to the Beatles. I wanted to understand their songs, so I began translating the lyrics. Slowly but surely, I started understanding more and more. Then one day, I met two women from England on a train. We had a simple conversation, but it gave me a huge boost. It helped me realize that I could learn English. From that moment on, I worked on my English almost every day, and I improved. Eventually, I enrolled in this school. Our teacher thanked me for sharing my story and then said, here's something really interesting about your experience. At first, you didn't have any motivation to learn English. Then you found motivation through music. You wanted to understand songs. This shows how important motivation is. When you have motivation, you can learn anything. When you don't, it's much harder to succeed. Our teacher then asked everyone in the class about their motivation for learning English. The stories were fascinating. One girl said she wanted to read historical books in their original English. Another student dreamed of becoming a professional tennis coach in England, and he needed perfect English for his career. A woman shared that she wanted to work for a large international company and needed English for her job. I realized that everyone had some reason for learning English, whether it was to use it in real life or to access information from books. At the end of the lesson, our teacher asked if we liked English. I replied, I didn't like English in high school, but now I like it a lot. I can see how useful it is to know this language. Our teacher smiled and said, this is another important factor. When you're learning a new language, it's easier when you like something connected to it, whether it's people, music, culture, or history. If you like English, it becomes much easier to learn. If you're motivated to communicate in English, it's important to know at least 3,000 words. Without that motivation, it's harder to find time to practice, and it becomes difficult to reach the level of 3,000 words. I agreed with my teacher. Now I enjoy listening to the Beatles, but I also admire my teacher and my boss, who is also English. I also enjoy English humor. It's much easier for me to find time to practice English every day. On Saturday, I played football for my school team. We had some very talented players, and we won 3-2. We were all thrilled with the victory, so we went to the pub afterward to celebrate. Our teacher's final point stayed with me. When you want to learn English, you need to have motivation to use it every day. In the next lesson, one of the students asked our teacher a question. You say that it's important to know 3,000 words. Where can I find these 3,000 words? Our teacher replied, "You can find a list of the 3,000 most frequent words in English on the internet, but it's difficult to learn new words just from a list. These words aren't connected to any context or story. You don't learn what other words go together with these words in sentences. This method works for some words, though. These are basic words that describe things and people around us. Words like mother, father, apple, blue, orange, dot, book, car, house, city, boy, girl, water, cinema, or paper. These are words that you can easily imagine. For example, when you learn the word dog, it's easy to picture it and you have a clear idea of what it means. But, our teacher continued, when you want to learn words like decide or opinion, this method doesn't work as well. This is a problem that many students face. They begin by studying lists of words, and at first it works for them, so they believe that this is the best way to learn English. They don't realize that once they reach around 1,000 words, they need to start using a different system. To learn more advanced words, you need to learn them in the context of sentences. When you understand the meaning of a word in a sentence, it's much easier to remember. You can learn words from lists, but this method has a limit, and that limit is usually around 1,000 words. Plus, learning this way is very slow. Our teacher then said, "There are much better methods, such as reading. For beginners, a great book to start with is Robinson Crusoe in Simple English. You can find it at RobinsonCrusoeInLevels.com. It's a great book for learning new words. There's also an interesting rule to remember. Every word that is important for you will come back to your life again and again. This is very similar to how we learn our own language as children. We don't study words from lists. We simply use the language, and the important words naturally keep reappearing in our lives. We continue learning new words this way throughout our lives. For example, the teacher said, the verb Google is a new word in many languages. We didn't learn this word from a list. We learned it by using the language. When you first heard the word Google, you probably didn't know what it meant, but then you heard it again and again because it became important for you. After some time, you understood what it meant. Forget about lists of words, the teacher advised. Learn new words by reading stories and other interesting texts. When you use English every day, you'll naturally learn 3,000 words before you know it. Does this make sense? Yes, said the student. Thank you. After school, I went to work. I already knew my job well, and things started to feel automatic. I was happy because I could understand my customers. It wasn't very difficult because the conversations were usually the same. Our customers often wanted coffee or sandwiches, so the words were usually the same or similar. My confidence grew, and sometimes I even started having longer conversations with the customers. Everything was going great until something surprising happened. Our teacher had a final piece of advice for us. When you learn a new word, make sure you learn it as part of a whole sentence. On Tuesday, something interesting happened while I was working. 2 customers came to our cafe. They were a husband and wife. The man started speaking to me, and I immediately recognized that he was speaking English, but I couldn't understand him. I couldn't figure out what he wanted. I thought maybe he was asking for something we didn't have, so I called my boss for help. She spoke to the man, and then she sold him 2 coffees and 2 sandwiches. I was surprised. When they left, I went to my boss and apologized for not understanding the man. She told me it was okay, and explained that this could happen when people speak with an accent we're not used to. She then told me that the couple was from Scotland. The next day, I went to school and shared this story with my teacher. I told her how stupid I felt for not understanding our customer. I wasn't sure if my English was good enough for my job. My boss had been fine with it, but I still felt I needed some help. I wanted to know what I could do in situations like this. My teacher said, "I understand. You understand the English spoken in London, but the Scottish accent is new to you. Your ears aren't trained to understand that accent yet. You need to listen more to Scottish English. You need to train your ears to it too. What happened to you is completely normal. When you already speak English to a certain level and then go to a country where people speak with a different accent, it's common not to understand them. It's okay. It usually takes about 2 weeks of exposure before you start understanding a new accent. Don't worry, there's nothing wrong with you. With practice, you can train your ears to understand the Scottish accent." I asked her, "So, what can I do to understand the Scottish accent better?" "I don't live in Scotland." She replied, "You can watch movies with Scottish English, or you can watch Scottish sitcoms, and soon you'll begin to understand." I thanked her, and after school, I went back to work. Around 4, two interesting customers came into the cafe. This time, they weren't from Scotland. They were foreigners, and their English was very basic. My boss started serving them, and when she realized they didn't speak English very well, she did something very interesting. She adjusted the way she spoke. She started using very simple sentences with only 3 or 4 words. I noticed that the ladies understood her perfectly. They ordered 2 coffees, 2 sandwiches, and 2 cakes. They were happy, and so was my boss. When the ladies left, I told my boss, "It was really nice how you changed your English so that the 2 ladies could understand you." My boss smiled and said, "Sometimes I have to speak in very simple English. It doesn't matter whether the customers speak English well or not. They are our customers, and we need to do everything we can to help them. If they feel comfortable speaking English here, they'll want to come back to our cafe every day." I thought to myself that our boss was a great businesswoman. She does everything possible to make our customers happy. It's true that we have a lot of customers. Our cafe is busy every day. And finally, I learned an important lesson. When you want to understand people with a special accent, it's important to listen to audio in that accent for a while to get used to it. The next day at school, I told my teacher about my experience with my boss and the 2 ladies who didn't speak English very well. Our teacher said, "Great. Your boss must be a very clever young lady. It's true that you can communicate with everyone. People who speak English very well can have conversations with those who are just starting out." Today, we're going to talk about the different levels of English and what you can do at each level. Let's begin with the lowest level, 1,000 words. At this level, students can talk about basic things in daily life. Their speaking ability is limited, but they can still have basic conversations, albeit slowly, for short periods with people who are willing to speak with them. Their sentences are usually very short, typically with only 4 words. If the other person speaks in short sentences too, a simple conversation is possible. When students move to a higher level, about 2,000 words, conversations become easier and sentences get longer. This is the level you're at right now. You can talk about many things from your life, like your family, hobbies, job, and traveling. However, You might encounter problems if you want to dive into deeper topics. But overall, this level is good enough for everyday use of English. If you want to have deeper conversations on many topics, it's good to aim for knowing 3,000 words. This is a good goal for English learners. Of course, you can learn more than 3,000 words. The more words you know, the easier it is to communicate. But 3,000 words is usually enough for communicating in English about almost everything. I think the two ladies at your cafe knew about 1,000 words. Your boss adapted to their level and was able to have a basic conversation with them. After school, I went back to work. The two ladies came to our cafe again, this time bringing two of their friends. It was my turn to serve them. I spoke to them in simple, short sentences, and they understood me. This was great. They told me they were tourists from Japan and that they liked our cafe because people here understood them. When you want to be able to communicate in English, learning 3,000 words is a solid step forward. On Thursday, I went to school again. One student had a very interesting question. She asked, "I'm very shy when I have to speak English. Can you help me? I don't want to feel so shy anymore." Our teacher replied, "It's true that when we use a foreign language, it's natural to feel shy. We're doing something we don't know perfectly, and the chance of making a mistake is high. I was also very shy when I learned foreign languages. I remember feeling afraid of making mistakes. When I made a mistake, I felt stupid, and sometimes my face would turn red. But now it's different. I use languages for communication. I care only about communicating. You know that I'm learning Spanish these days. Sometimes I make mistakes, but that doesn't stop me from speaking Spanish. It's true that sometimes I still feel shy when I speak Spanish. My face might turn red, but I don't care much about it anymore. It's a natural human feeling, and it's always just a brief moment. I keep speaking Spanish because I know that only by using it can I improve." She continued, "I also try to see things as they are. I'm a student, and I'm on my way to speaking good Spanish. It's not possible to jump many levels in a day. A beginner can't become a perfect speaker in 1 hour. I also remind myself of the value I bring to others. When I speak some Spanish, it's valuable to those who speak it as their native language. You can look at your own situation the same way. When you already speak some English, you can have a conversation with others in English. That's great. Think about what you already know. You know 2,000 words. You've already come from 0 to 2,000 words. Be proud of that." Our teacher explained, "Some students think that to know English means to speak like a native speaker, with perfect pronunciation, perfect grammar, and flawless speech. They think that if they're not perfect, they don't know English. They become shy because they're not perfect. These students are too hard on themselves, and that's unnecessary. You're doing great because you already speak some English. Keep working on it, and your shyness will gradually fade away." I really liked what our teacher said. Sometimes I feel shy too. I know I need to practice speaking a lot, but in some situations, I don't want to look foolish, so I don't speak as much as I could. I've decided to be braver in those situations and use them to practice even more. Then another student said, "Sometimes I want to say something, but I don't know the word I'm looking for. I stop, and I don't know what to do in those situations. I feel really stupid. The next time I have to speak English, I don't want to speak because I don't want to be in that awkward situation again. Can you help me with this?" Our teacher answered, When you start speaking English, you need to be prepared for a situation where you don't know the word you need. In those cases, you need to learn how to describe the word. This is an important skill when learning a new language. You must train yourself to express your ideas with the vocabulary you already know. For example, if you don't know how to say the word key, you can describe it as a small thing for opening a door. In your native language, you might also describe words like this, but you usually don't notice it. If you don't know a word, simply describe it so the other person understands. You can do the same in English, but you really need to practice this skill. Thinking aloud is a great technique to help you describe things better. Practice thinking aloud every day, and your ability to describe things will improve. She concluded, "You can learn English only when you use it. It's okay to be shy, but don't let it stop you from speaking English." The next day is Friday, and I go to school again. I am happy that I attend this class not only because we have a great teacher, but because there are students from many different countries in our class. Some students are from Europe, others from South America. There's also one student from Japan and one from South Korea. This is good for me because the students don't speak my native language, so when I speak to them, I have to use only English. It's a great way to practice. Today, we have a new student in our class. Her name is Sophia, and she's from Argentina. At the beginning of the lesson, Sophia says that she thinks she doesn't have a talent for studying languages, but she wants to work hard to get better. Our teacher asks her, "Why do you think you don't have a talent?" Sophia answers, "I think I don't have a talent because my sister learns English very quickly, but it's hard for me." Then our teacher asks everyone in the class, "Do you think you have a talent for learning languages? Please raise your hand if you believe you have a talent." I look around the class and no one raises their hand. Our teacher smiles and says, "Now I want to tell you something. Many people believe that you need to have a special talent if you really want to learn a new language. I agree. Yes, you need some talent to learn a new language a lot, but I also believe that you already have a talent for learning languages. Why? Because you already learned one language, your native language. You were successful at learning your native language, and now you speak it fluently. All people who can learn their native language have a talent for learning languages. So why do many students think they aren't talented? The reason is simple. There are some people who are super talented. These super talented people remember new words quickly and for a long time. Maybe you know someone like this, perhaps someone at your work or in your family. There are not many of these super talented people, but they do exist. I think Sophia's sister might be one of them. Learning a new language is easy and fun for them. Sophia agrees, saying, "It's true, my sister is much better than everyone else." Our teacher continues, "Yes, it's true that these super talented people exist. That's a fact, and we can't change it. But it's not a problem. The real issue is when we compare ourselves to them. If we don't learn as quickly as they do, we start to think we aren't talented. I ask you to do one thing. Stop comparing yourself to these super talented people. Yes, they're lucky, and they have an advantage, but you can be lucky too. You're talented at many other things. Maybe you're better than others at singing, swimming, playing tennis, solving math problems, cooking, or fixing cars. People are all different, and that's what makes the world beautiful. Now, you can believe that you're also talented. Maybe not super talented, but talented in your own way. When you believe you're talented, learning English will be much easier. These words from our teacher are very helpful. I know that I am talented at playing football and tennis. Now I also know that I'm talented at learning English. It's amazing. And what's even better is that there's a school party this evening. I'm really looking forward to it. I know that some girls from our class will be there. I hope Sophia is going too. I've known Sophia for only one day, but I already like her very much. If you can speak your native language, you already have a talent for learning English. On Monday, I go to school again. Our teacher asks us about Friday's school party. One student says that the party was great. We had a lot of drinks and had a lot of fun. The girls from our class liked the party too. I enjoyed it a lot as well, especially because Sophia was there. I could talk to her and we even danced together. Everything was very nice. There were also 2 boys from my football team at the party. These boys are from Brazil. Their English was basic. They could only speak in short sentences, but they were very funny at the party. They made a lot of jokes about life in England, other players from our team, and the girls from their class. Their sentences were very short, with only 3 or 4 words, but they spoke fluently. When we talk about the party, I tell my teacher it was really interesting to see that someone who doesn't know many words can already speak fluently. I know some students who are at a much higher level and they can't speak fluently. My teacher says, "The 2 boys from your football team showed you the right way. The boys used what they knew. They cared only about what was really important, communication." Then one girl asks, "So, what can we do if we want to speak English fluently? Should we go to parties and make jokes?" My teacher answers, "First, let me explain what fluent speaking is. Many students think that fluent speaking is fast speaking with a lot of words and perfect grammar, but there's a better, more correct definition of fluent speaking. Fluent speaking is speaking without long pauses. Some people can do it with 1,000 words. Some people can do it with 2,000 words. But there are also people who know 3,000 words and still can't speak fluently. If you want to speak fluently, you have to practice speaking. There's no other way to improve your fluency. Speaking is a physical activity. It's like playing a musical instrument. If you want to play the violin, you need to train the connection between your brain and the muscles in your fingers. When you want to speak well, you need to train the connection between your brain and the muscles in your mouth. Some students have had an interesting experience, and maybe you have had it too. You meet a foreigner who wants to speak with you in English. You want to express the ideas in your head, but you can't find the right words. After the conversation ends, you replay it in your head and realize you actually knew the right words, but the conversation is already finished. Why does this happen? Because you haven't had enough practice. Your speaking isn't automatic, and it's not automatic because you don't practice it often enough. When you want to speak fluently, I recommend speaking for at least 30 minutes a day. You can speak to a real person. If you don't have a real person to talk to, you can practice by thinking aloud. It's important to really think aloud, not just in your head. You need to practice the connection between your brain and your muscles. And you can do this by thinking aloud. Does it make sense? Yes, says the girl. If you want to speak fluently, speak for 30 minutes every day. The day began as usual, and the classroom buzzed with the soft hum of students settling into their seats. The lesson had started, but Mia's mind was elsewhere. She had been thinking about something for a while now, something that had been bothering her since she first arrived in this foreign country. She had made so much progress in learning English, but now, with only a few weeks left before returning home, she wondered if it was possible to continue her studies back in her own country. After a long pause, she raised her hand and spoke up, her voice filled with uncertainty. Next week, I'm going home. I really want to keep learning English in my country, but I'm not sure how to choose a good school there. How do I know if it's the right place for me? Her words hung in the air, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. It was a question that many students had asked themselves at some point: how to continue learning after leaving a place where the language was all around them. The teacher, Mrs. Thompson, smiled warmly at Mia. It was clear that this was a question worth answering. "That's a very good question, Mia," she said, her voice calm and encouraging. "You know, I believe that when you read, listen, and speak a lot, you can learn English without even being in a school. The language comes to you naturally if you use it often. But if you want to pay for your education and make faster progress, a good teacher can make a big difference. It's important to find someone who can guide you." Mia nodded thoughtfully. It was reassuring to hear that learning English didn't always require a formal classroom. Mrs. Thompson continued, "If you want to know if the school you're considering is right for you, there's a simple way to check. Before you start any lessons, go to testlanguages.com. There, you can test how many words you already know. After a few lessons at the new school, take the test again, and you'll see how many new words you've learned. If you're happy with the progress, then you know you're on the right track. And remember, it's also important to enjoy each lesson. You should look forward to it. Feel excited about it. That's how you know you found the right place." Mia felt a sense of relief wash over her. This sounded like a simple and effective way to measure her progress. But then Mrs. Thompson added something that made her eyes light up with excitement. "I also offer private lessons over Skype. If you don't find a good school back home, or if you need help, I can teach you personally." Mia couldn't believe her ears. Private lessons with her teacher, the one who had been so kind and helpful throughout her time here. The idea was too good to pass up. "That sounds amazing," Mia said, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "I'd love to have private lessons with you. This is such good news." As the bell rang and the class began to disperse, Mia couldn't stop smiling. She had come to a foreign country with a goal: to improve her English. And now, as she prepared to return home, she realized that learning didn't have to stop just because she was leaving. She could continue her studies no matter where she was. All she needed was the right mindset and maybe, just maybe, a little help from the teacher who had guided her so far. When you go to school, Mia thought, it's not just about the lessons or the textbooks. It's about the joy of learning, the feeling of progress, and the desire to keep going, wherever you are. It was a quiet Wednesday morning when Emma arrived at school, her mind already buzzing with the questions and thoughts she had been carrying with her for the past few days. As usual, the classroom quickly filled with the hum of conversation as students took their seats. The lesson began, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to understand something more deeply, something that had been puzzling her for a while. Halfway through the class, she raised her hand, her voice cutting through the chatter. "Teacher," she said, her tone curious, "how do you know so much about learning languages? Where did you find all this information?" Mrs. Roberts, their teacher, smiled knowingly and paused before answering. She had heard similar questions many times before, but this one felt different. "There are many ways I gather information," she began. "The first is through experience. I've been teaching for over 7 years now. With all that time spent working with students, I've learned what methods work best. I carefully observe and adjust, focusing only on the things that truly help." Emma listened closely, feeling a sense of admiration for her teacher. Mrs. Roberts continued, "I also spend a lot of time researching. The internet is a wonderful resource, and I find many new ideas there. When I find something that resonates with me, I try it out in my classes. If it works, I share it with others. Over the years, I've built up a library of knowledge and techniques." Emma nodded, but her curiosity was far from satisfied. She wanted to know more. "And what about when you need more answers?" she asked, her eyes wide with intrigue. "Is there another way you get information?" Mrs. Roberts smiled, a hint of mystery in her expression. "There is one other way," she said, lowering her voice slightly. "I call it my magic park." Emma blinked in confusion. "Magic park?" she repeated, unsure if she had heard her teacher correctly. "What do you mean?" The teacher paused, her face softening with a knowing look. "This is something I've kept to myself for a long time. I know it might sound strange to some, but I truly believe in it. When I have a question or when I'm struggling to find an answer, I go to the park. It's a place where I feel connected to something larger than myself." Emma's curiosity piqued. "Can we go there too? What happens at this park?" Mrs. Roberts chuckled softly, her eyes glimmering with a sense of calm. "The park is not far from here. It's just a 10-minute walk. Many people go there to relax and clear their minds. The atmosphere is peaceful, almost magical for me. I sit on a bench, close my eyes, and let my body relax. I slow my breathing and focus on quieting my thoughts. Then I ask the question, and that's it. I wait." Emma's mind raced as she tried to make sense of this. "But how do you get the answers?" she asked, skeptical yet fascinated. "How do you know it works?" The teacher smiled again, her expression warm and reassuring. "The answers don't always come right away. Sometimes I'll have a new idea pop into my head. Other times, someone I meet later will share something that turns out to be exactly what I needed. Sometimes, I watch a video or read something online that answers my question. And sometimes, the answers come to me the next day, like a sudden realization. What's interesting is that the answers almost always come." Emma was silent for a moment, absorbing the idea. Could it really be this simple? Was it possible that answers could come from the universe just by asking for them? "I know it might sound a little crazy," Mrs. Roberts continued, her voice gentle, "but this is what works for me. I call it the magic park because it's magical to me. The park itself is beautiful, a peaceful place where I feel connected to something bigger. I go there when I need guidance, and I always find what I need." As the lesson continued, Emma's mind wandered, reflecting on what she had just heard. She didn't know if she believed in magic parks or the idea of asking the universe for answers, but something about the teacher's calm confidence made her wonder. Maybe, when she faced challenges of her own, she could find her own version of the magic park, a place where she could clear her mind, ask questions, and wait for the answers to come. It was a comforting thought. After all, When you needed help, sometimes all you had to do was ask. The following day, Sophia sat quietly in her seat, her thoughts drifting back to all the lessons she had absorbed over the past weeks. She had made noticeable progress in her English skills, and her teacher's methods had truly helped her feel more confident. As the class began, a girl in the front row raised her hand, her voice filled with curiosity. Thank you for everything you've shared with us about learning English. Could you give us a summary of the key points? What rules should we follow daily to learn English well? Sophia watched as their teacher, Mrs. Green, smiled and nodded, clearly prepared for this kind of question. Of course, she said, her voice steady and reassuring. Learning English can be broken down into 3 main activities. To speak English well, you need to read, listen, and speak. You've all heard this before, but it's crucial that you practice each of these activities equally. If you focus too much on one and neglect the others, your progress will be slower. Mrs. Green paused, looking around at the class, making sure everyone was paying attention. In my experience, the key is to spend at least 90 minutes a day using English. It doesn't have to feel like studying, but it's important that you actively engage with the language every day. Sophia thought about her own routine, wondering if she was doing enough to improve. Let me explain each activity in more detail, Mrs. Green continued. First, reading. Try to read for at least 30 minutes every day. This is the minimum. But don't read just to study. Read to enjoy the story, to learn new information. It's important to enjoy the process. You've heard me say this often, but it really makes a difference in your learning. Sophia nodded, understanding the importance of reading for pleasure and not just for study. Mrs. Green went on, next, listening. Listen to English for another 30 minutes every day. Start with simpler materials like audiobooks or the news. As your level improves, you can move on to more advanced content. Once you know around 2,000 words, you can begin watching movies or videos in English. Sophia was intrigued by the idea of gradually building up her listening skills, and she made a mental note to try it. Mrs. Green then explained, finally, speaking. Speaking is critical. Aim to speak for at least 30 minutes every day. Ideally, you should speak with real people, your teacher, classmates, or friends. Find someone who's at your level or just above and practice speaking with them. But if you don't have anyone to talk to, don't worry. You can practice speaking by shadowing or even thinking aloud. These methods have helped me a lot with my Spanish as I don't have native speakers around to practice with. Sophia felt inspired. She realized that mastering English wasn't as complicated as it had once seemed. So it's really just about reading, listening, and speaking every day? She asked herself, feeling the weight of the simplicity and power of that routine. Mrs. Green smiled warmly. Exactly. These 3 activities will bring you the success you want. If you dedicate time to them daily, you will improve step by step. A wave of gratitude washed over Sophia as she listened. The girl who had asked the question turned to Mrs. Green with a smile, saying, "This is such great advice. Thank you for everything." It was clear that the class had found the information valuable. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the lesson, Sophia felt a bit nostalgic. It was her last day at school, and she had learned so much from her teacher. Mrs. Green, knowing this was the end of their time together, kindly asked Sophia if she would like to say something to the class. Sophia stood up, a little emotional, but proud of how far she had come. I just want to say how much I've enjoyed this class, Sophia began, her voice steady but filled with gratitude. I've met so many kind people, and I've learned a lot from all of you, especially from our teacher. I'm giving you my email address, and if you ever want to reach out, feel free to contact me. With a final smile, Sophia waved goodbye to her classmates. Although she felt a twinge of sadness, she knew that her journey didn't end here. She was ready to continue her life, equipped with the knowledge and skills she had gained over the past month. A year passed, and Sophia had stayed true to her commitment to learning English. Every day she read, listened, and spoke for at least 90 minutes. She had expanded her vocabulary to 4,000 words, and her confidence in the language had grown exponentially. Sophia had even found a new job teaching English to beginners. She loved the work, especially because it allowed her to share what she had learned with others. Her students, knowing only a few hundred words, reminded her of herself when she first started. But now, as a teacher, Sophia was ready to pass on the wisdom she had gained from Mrs. Green. Every lesson, she shared the techniques her teacher had taught her, hoping her students would find the same success. Sophia knew that learning English wasn't a quick process, but with dedication and the right methods, reading, listening, and speaking every day, it was something achievable, and she was determined to help her students realize that too. Your journey of English discovery at Onyx Shadowing English doesn't end here. Remember, every like, every subscription, and every notification bell is a step closer to your success. Don't hesitate to share your experiences, questions, or even your aha moments in the comments below. I'm always here, accompanying you through every challenge. And believe that with perseverance and passion, you won't just speak English, you'll live it to the fullest. See you in the next lesson, where wonders await.